Welcome back to the Locker Room podcast number 58. I'm joined as usual with Stevie Poacher. I'm also pleased to say that we've got our resident football analyst, Daniel St. Ledger, with us today. Welcome, Daniel.
Thanks for having me back, Joe. I wasn't sure whether we let in after the last time, but did something all right.
Yeah, we had great feedback from the last podcast. What we're going to do is we're going to review the weekend's football matches, lads. There were a lot of football matches at the weekend. There were 4 in Leinster, 2 in Ulster, 2 in Munster, and 1 in Connacht. So we'll try to get through most of them. But before we do that, just a huge thanks to our sponsors, Ripped, for supporting the podcast. Ripp's online platform provides coaches with everything they need to optimize athlete performance. Head over there to rip.app for more information. Okay, Daniel, big weekend for obviously the Leinster Championship. We had 4 games in it. Let's start with the Leinster Championship and let's have a look at Dublin and their annihilation of Wexford. It was 124-0. Yes, we all probably expected Dublin to come through that comfortably, even with their relegation to Division 2. But still in all, were you impressed with them?
It's very, very hard to analyse. Like there was a massive gap, even just in the basics and from the strength and conditioning point of view. You know, Dublin just had bigger, stronger, faster players, and that goes an awful long way. So it's hard to actually pick out anything majorly different tactically they were doing. You know, from the team announcement, I thought it was interesting. You know, playing Con from the start, having not played any league games, that was kind of it made out that they wanted to make a statement, you know, and I thought that was kind of interesting that they weren't easing them back in. They didn't, not that they may not have trusted some of the lads they use in the league, but it was basically a kind of a signal that you're our guy, Con, and as good a footballer as he is, it's unusual to see Dublin so heavily reliant on and look, everything will be grand when Con is back. And, you know, as Kerry probably learned last year, to have that kind of reliance on one footballer is not ideal. But tactically, as I said, there was nothing you could see discernibly different. Like, you know, they probably play with a bit more tempo and a bit more energy than they have normally. But I kind of would expect that as well, because there was almost an element of them having a point to prove after the league, which is amazing to think of a 6-time All-Ireland team. I know it's a different team now, but still a lot of the same individuals. And they had a point to prove a bit. And I was texting Stevie during the game after about 10 minutes. Wexford had started really well. They controlled the tempo and they held on to the ball for periods of time. And I was actually thinking, God, Dublin are under a little bit of a squeeze here, you know. But slowly but surely they wore their way into it. But as regards tactically, I don't know. I didn't see a whole lot different. You know, there was the only thing I could possibly, spot maybe was when they were defending in numbers. They were overloading the tackle area a lot. So in the league, a huge amount of time you were seeing one-on-ones and you were seeing one man chasing the ball in the middle third of the field without working as a unit. And there's a little bit more of maybe hunting in 3s and 4s, and they were happy to let Wexford have a little bit of ball in their half. But as soon as Wexford kind of came into their half of the field, there was a real zip in their transition, you know. And the counter-attacking game is much maligned, as we know, but that's pretty much what Dublin did to a Division 4 team in the first half. You know, they let them come on to them and they hit them on the break. So yeah, I'd be slow to say they're back, or I wouldn't be so sure. But as I said, they'll probably still get to an All-Ireland semi-final, and there's bigger. I think Brian Fenton let a little slip in the interview afterwards. He said we've bigger tests to come in the summer, you know. So that's probably where they're thinking as well.
He certainly did. And Stephen, just looking at the Dublin performance there, as Daniel sort of alluded to, is this a resurgence of the Dublin team? Or can we not look into this too much because Wexford are a Division 4 team and, you know, they're miles apart?
Joe, I've said for a number of years now, and I'll still say it again to reinforce what Daniel said, is that one of the major issues one of the major differences between Division 1 and Division 3 and 4 is the level of physical conditioning. You know, and it's a huge difference. And like, you've got to look at a team who have, for the last 6 or 7 years, probably longer. Daniel will probably be able to tell you the age profile of those Dublin players better than me. But for the last 6 or 7 years, those lads are on a really structured, tailored individual program. They've been following the right nutrition advice. They've been getting the best of training, the best of nutrition and sleep and diet, whatever the bloody need to do to get to the highest level from a conditioning point of view. You know, they're so far down the line in that respect, you know, in comparison to counties from other divisions. Like, and Tyrone versus Fermanagh was a prime example, Joe. You know, Tyrone obviously didn't play well on Sunday. They didn't play well against Fermanagh, but simply the simple difference in physical conditioning eventually wore Fermanagh down late in the second half in that game, you know, and that obviously got them over the line. And it was exactly the same with Dublin. I think after 20, 25 minutes, it was only 5-1 or 6-1 or something like that. I know I'd say only 5-1, but, you know, they hadn't pulled really away from Wexford like they would have done in the past, Joe. Like Dublin would have been out in the past, Daniel, and absolutely blew teams out of the water in that first 15, 20 minutes. The game would have been over. It would have been a bore fest after that. And it was nearly like a slow death for Wexford the other day. But I don't know, Joe, if it's enough to say they're back. But for me, I definitely seen a little bit of a difference in their mentality and their approach in comparison to the National League. But I still do believe there are fundamental things that happened in that game against Wexford that wouldn't happen under Jim Gavin. For example, the likes of Lee Gannon breaking forward and shooting the outside of his foot, or coming inside and not seeing a man and maybe trying a ridiculous pass or something like that. And I just feel there's a number of players still within the Dublin team currently that probably just aren't at the 2017, 2018 level, Joe, that the previous players would have been at. And that's, you know, just simply because they were an awesome side and a fantastic team and a really strong and deep bench to come into the game as well. Fenton's comments were very interesting. It wasn't like, you know, we've got a big day out the next day. We've got bigger games out in the summer, you know, so they're obviously thinking further down the line and saying, look, they'll cruise through Leinster. Let's be honest. They're going to beat me. They'll beat me by close to double scores, whether we like it or not, particularly the games at Croke Park. It's going to be a waltzing victory for them. They'll get to the final. Kildare will be in the final. I'd say probably Kildare will beat Westmeath, and there'll be a bit of a spurt from Kildare for 20 minutes, half an hour. But in Croke Park, you know, there's only one winner. So they're guaranteed, probably, in my opinion, to win another Leinster based on what I've seen in Leinster so far. But it'll be interesting to see when the big guns arrive, how far they have gone down the road in comparison to where they were in the National League, you know.
And Daniel, beyond Leinster, when we're talking about Con, you mentioned Con coming back. You know, yesterday you could see his sort of cutting edge, his decisiveness. First of all, why is Con so good, and how important is he to Dublin's success going forward?
He definitely changes the way they have to play a little bit. Like he probably gives them a kick option they probably don't have otherwise. You know, it's and again, this is when we're talking about coming up against Division 1 teams, not like against a Division 3, 4 team, they're going to have kick options all over the field. But let's say when we're talking about longer down the summer, he is almost guaranteed to win 9 out of 10 balls that go into him, even if they're 60-40s. And that changes how a team can defend against you. So most teams, let's say this year against Dublin, were kind of able to squeeze the middle third a little bit more because Dean Rock's game isn't necessarily ball winning. Cormac Costello, more of a finisher. You know, you might be guaranteed that he's going to win his own ball. Odell from Temple Ogue, kind of in a similar mold as Costello. So they have a lot of very similar type of players. But Con gives you a kind of a directness that it forces teams to have to drop a little bit deeper, and that might make a difference, as it proved. He had a double sweeper on Saturday and he still came out with 1-6, but it does change the whole narrative, and that gives Dublin a little bit more time in the middle of the field, and it allows, like, for example, Fenton strolled over 4 points in the first half because Wexford had to sit so deep because of the threat of Con, and I think that opens up a whole new dynamic for this Dublin team, and we probably never saw it up to this point because he's practically been ever present since he came into the panel. He barely missed a game with injury, so it definitely changes how the opposition will play against Dublin when he's there as opposed to when he's not there. But his finishing is looked as razor sharp as ever, but it's his threat, it's his constant ball winning threat, and he shows hard. It's not a kind of a watery sort of a half run to the sideline that you're kind of wondering will he won't he get ball. Like, if you looked at his retention the last day, most of it was in an arc around the goalpost from ball catcher to ball catcher. It's very rare you see him in a corner having to work it out. He's always in a really dangerous position. And look, I don't think that's coaching. I think there's an element of a real kind of a poacher's instinct and a natural ball winning instinct that they've really missed, I think, since they've been gone.
And Stevie, just before we come off that game, Wexford, as Daniel was saying, you know, they were doing all the right things at the beginning of this game. Now, Shane Roach, he must be pulling his hair out because he knows he's up against a team that's far superior. Obviously, now they're going into the Tailteann Cup. How important is the Tailteann Cup for the likes of Wexford?
Well, Joe, you'd obviously, you know, having worked with London, you obviously understand the difficulties and things that the Division 4 sides have, you know, and, you know, you're going to get maybe possibly one championship game. Obviously, it was obscure the year that, obviously, the 2 years I was involved with Carlo, with Daniel there, like we had 5 championship games in 2017. And I think we had 4 championship games in 2018. So for a Division 4 team, it's quite unique to have 9 championship games in 2 years. I think that's what most teams are complaining. Listen, Anthony, or not Anthony, well, technically it is Anthony McEntee, Tony McEntee, sorry, from Crossland Lane, who's the Sligo manager. And I listened to his interview after the game where he was more or less conceding defeat to Roscommon. And he says, look, the bottom line is we need more games at our level against opposition of our capacity. But at the same time, Joe, I'm going to sort of play devil's advocate here, and Daniel will probably be able to back me up here because he was involved in those games. But I felt games that Carlo had against the likes of Dublin and Monaghan and Tyrone, I felt we learned an awful lot more from those games than playing the likes of Leitrim or London or Wexford. And that's all due respect. Like, there's no disrespect to those opposition, but when you're playing a team of your level, you know, you're still making the same mistakes and getting away with it. You're still getting the same scores without having to really try to get them, you know, whereas when you play the bigger sides, you learn so much more. And like Daniel will probably echo this, like I would say, Daniel, honestly, in hindsight, 2017's game against Monaghan was a massive learning curve from Carlo going into 2018, like a huge learning curve. And for me, it more or less was the platform for a really successful year the following year, Joe. Gives you confidence. And this is my argument. We have a product that is every team plays at their own level, and it's called the league. That's the product we have. Like, it's actually a better product than most sports have. We have a national league that is very, very fair. It's everyone playing the same level. But for me, you get to the championship, you know, you get the one-off day, the big day, whatever it happens to be, you get a cut at somebody. That's fine. You know, and I know a Tailteann Cup, but I listened to Barry O'Hagan this morning, for example, in the Irish News, saying that he's got no desire and no appetite to play in the Tailteann Cup for Down. That's fair enough. But that's, unfortunately, that's where Down are at the minute. That's the level they're at. But I would say for a county like Down, it's probably actually more beneficial, believe it or not, than a county like Wexford, because Down actually have an opportunity, if they get their house in order, got their gear together, they could actually go and win the Tailteann Cup quite comfortably. You know, and that might give them confidence. Some of the younger players like the Ryan McGills and Owen Murdoch, I know we're going to speak of it Down soon, like, but it would give some of the younger players then a bit more confidence and belief going forward. But I don't know what Daniel's take is in it, but I personally feel, Joe, that for me, you need to be playing teams that are of better level than actually the same level as you.
It's probably, as far as I could see, like there's an importance on where a team is at as well, and what stage in their development it is, you know. So for us in that year in 2017, we had a lot of 27, 28-year-olds who kind of been around the block, had played Division 4 for 7 or 8 years, who were kind of ready for a level of organisation, which we ended up getting, and we're ready for a kind of a different sort of a challenge. But if we had a team maybe 5 years previous where we're 22, 23-year-olds, we weren't overly organised. Like in 2014, Meath bet us by 7-13 to 6 points. I can tell you, we didn't learn an awful lot from that. You know, that was fairly chastening. So there's a huge, like, it really depends on where a team is at in their profile. Like I was thinking about in a Carlow context, and it's interesting you brought up Down. In a Carlow context, Niall Crew should be, you know, really excited about, or getting his panel excited about what's coming up for the Tailteann Cup, because the whole narrative has been about a young team. So after the league, it almost should have been a case of, right, lads, this championship game, if we win it, great. If we don't win it, it doesn't matter, because our focus is on first round of the Tailteann Cup, because this is what we need. We need games. We need another 3 or 4 weeks training together. And, you know, that's probably great for a young Carlow panel, but would it be great for a team, let's say, like Offaly, who have been, you know, kind of at the top end of Division 3, Division 2, would have had a fairly bad defeat to Wexford that they'd be expecting to win? You know, do they get the same level of enthusiasm from a Tailteann Cup than that a Carlow would? You know, probably not. So you're going to see probably a huge disparity between what you would imagine traditional teams, you know, the strengths of traditional teams, and what maybe like a Sligo who seem to be enthusiastic about it. You know, there could be some funny results thrown in, but look, whether we like it or lump it, it's here. So I kind of think this is where managers have to earn their salt a little bit. And again, if you're managing a county in Division 3 or 4, it's up to you to get your players excited. It's up to you to sell the product, because at the end of the day, if you're looking at long-term development, this is important, and there's no point kind of whinging and moaning about it. Like, you have to you have to look at this as a stepping stone to not just next year, but it could be the year afterwards, and rather than looking at it in the short term consistently.
Joe, I want to use a quick example. I want to use a quick example of Limerick. And Daniel will know because he played against Limerick for a long period of his career. Like, there's Limerick, Billy Lee. I have a lot of time for Billy Lee and the job that he's done in Limerick. And you've got to look at where Limerick have come from. And you would have known, Joe, yourself, you're involved in London. You would have fancied your chances going up against Limerick most weekends. When we were with Carlo, the couple of years I was with Carlo, I think we beat them 3 times in the 3 games we played them, or 2 or 3, whatever it happened to be. Like, we never failed them. But Limerick got their house in order 4 or 5 years ago when Billy Lee came in. They were taking awful beatings, awful pummelings. They got a load of young lads in. They got rid of a bit of dead wood. They were in a really good strength conditioning program. They're very well organised. They know what they're doing. Tactically, they're astute. Billy Lee does his homework on the opposition. He's very, very astute in that he will research and delve into the opposition in great detail. He'll pick his matchups. He has a good system in place. The players are buying in. There's belief within the panel. They've gone from Division 4 to Division 3 to Division 2. They're now in the last 4 of a Munster Championship against Tipperary, where they will fancy their chances. They have perceivably could get to a Munster final, and they could perceivably be in an All-Ireland quarter-final. And for them, that is a massive, massive success. Like, would the same success be for that Limerick group win the Tailteann Cup? Maybe to back up what Daniel saying there, maybe where they are presently right now, no, it probably is not, but you have to say, and I'm just going to be honest with you, Joe, I think there's far too many people that can just use the excuse, players aren't here, the gulf's too big, blah, blah, blah. It's a load of nonsense. A management team can dictate so much of where a group is and how a group develops. Massive, massive. It's got a massive influence. If you've got a management team who the players are going to buy into and believe in, okay, then it's going to take you places. But if you don't, like players aren't stupid, Joe. Players will work out bluffers like that. You work out a bluffer like. And there's so many bluffers in the inter-county circuit, it's unbelievable. And unfortunately, it's a big statement, but unfortunately, it's the truth. Like, there's far too many, and they're out and they're on the roundabout, and they stay on the roundabout because of their name or because of what they achieved 30 years ago as a player, whatever it happens to be. And that's the reality. And that is the reality of the situation.
Yeah, it'll certainly be interesting to see how our teams treat this Tailteann Cup. Lads, just having a look at Dublin, they'll be playing Meath in Croke Park. That was announced yesterday. Daniel, Meath beat Wicklow 4-13 to 112. A couple of good performances, individual performances there, Brian Menton and Jordan Morris. How did you see that game? And do you think they have any hope against Dublin? Bearing in mind that I think Meath only got beaten by them by 6 points in last year's Leinster.
Yeah, it's again, Meath are kind of like the Meath and Wicklow was kind of like Dublin and Wexford. It's kind of hard to read too much into it. Like, Wicklow are conceding fairly heavy, and how much strain was their system or their skills put under, as well as Wicklow would have tried, probably not. So we kind of don't really know much about Meath yet, but Meath always kind of cried out as a team that needed a bit of organisation, because there's no doubting they have players that they seem to have put a huge emphasis on strength and conditioning, and they're some really, really athletic players. But I think they probably need to swallow a little bit of medicine against Dublin, and kind of try and frustrate as best we can. And people are going to say, sure, you have to go and have a go, yada, yada, yada. But let's look at Derry and Rory Gallagher, and I know we're going to come to it in a few minutes, but the history is written by the victors. So, like, Derry went out and they stifled Tyrone. They had their matchups right. They were niggly. They were nasty. I think Meath need a little bit of that. I think Meath need to have a really set game plan about what they want to do, and they have to execute. And I'm not sure they're going to have that. I think there'll be an element, it always strikes me, and I could be wrong, of, lads, we need to work harder. We need more passion, more aggression. But they're all really generic terms that there's no actual way of implementing those things without some sort of structure. And I think that's what Meath are badly lacking. And, I'm not sure if that's going to change. I mean, you can't change massively in 3 or 4 weeks between league and championship. So I'd imagine it'll be more of the same for Meath. And kind of, as Stevie alluded to earlier, there might be a 20-minute spurt where it might be, competitive for a while, but eventually the system will nearly always win. And it's hard to see anything but a 7 or 8 or 9 point win for Dublin, to be honest. Yeah,
it's certainly going to be a challenge for Meath. 2 more games, Stevie, in Leinster. Westmeath 3-13, Longford 0-14, and Kildare 2-22 to Louth's 0-12. Just on the Kildare game, now Kildare went up 7-0 and then went 10-1. So for a large part of this game, Louth didn't really get started. How important is it for a team that is inferior to the team that they're playing to manage out the first sort of 10, 15 minutes of the game and not let it get away from you?
Yeah, Joe, it's important. It's obviously important, but going to that specific game itself, I never really grasped the hype around Louth. I could never really get my head around the hype surrounding them. And I know Sam will write on a very high profile podcast and talked about winning all Ireland's and Leinster's, and and sometimes when when you're setting goals, like I think one of the most important things about any goal setting is that your targets have to be achievable and realistic. And I don't think those targets are achievable or realistic for Louth. I think it was a wake up call for where Louth football's at. Louth club football wouldn't be very strong, Joe. It's a small county. Obviously, look, hooray to them for getting promoted again. Brilliant, but it was one of those leagues where for me, it was no surprise. Kildare have a little bit more about them this year. I've said that before. They have a little bit more about, obviously, the likes of Jimmy Hyland, who has been a promising player for them, coming from their under 21 successful team. It's taken him a while, but he seems to have found his feet now. But one player who has really, really come of age, I know it's hard to say this come of age because he's been around a long time, but he seems to have matured from a playing perspective, is Daniel Flynn. He's playing really, really outstanding football. And if he can hold his, and Kildare can bring, as Daniel talked about, that sort of wee edginess and that nastiness. And they've got 4 men involved with Kildare now who bleed Kildare football. The players, if you can't sit in a changing room and look at those lads and what they have done for Kildare and not have or drive or passion, and it's slightly different for Cian O'Neill. Cian on the train quite a bit, and he's been around a lot of counties, so maybe for the likes of someone like that coming into a county like Kildare, maybe just doesn't get the same reaction from the players or whatever is needed. But these guys coming in, have obviously given Kildare footballers a real lift, Joe, and the talent's always been in Kildare. What's always been pointed at Kildare, and particularly from northern teams, is that Kildare have a soft centre, weak mentally, soft centre, have been bullied easily. And this year was just, I seen small differences in their game, and they were unlucky. They were very unlucky not to stay in Division 1. They were very unlucky. They were unlucky against Tyrone not to win the game. They were unlucky in the athletic ground as well. They put up very, very spirited displays. Obviously, the victory over Dublin was a huge victory for them as a group, and I think that will have given them an awful lot of confidence. But again, Joe, that victory came in Newbridge, a packed Newbridge, partisan, provincial club ground with, thousands in the roaring them home and their own surroundings, their own pitch. I just think it's different when it gets to Croker. I just think it's slightly different, and that's something that will probably play against them when it comes to the final. They will beat Westmeath. Westmeath obviously had a spirited win over Longford. It was a game that could have went either way. I think Longford stayed in Division 3 just on the basis of Laois were that bad. I think that's why Longford more or less stayed in the division. So, Longford weren't particularly that good in the National League. And I know it's been a tough year for Billy. It's his first year in the management, Billy O'Loughlin and stuff like that, and very, very inexperienced. So he learned from this as well as a manager and things like that. But for someone like Longford, actually, the Tailteann Cup is probably a good opportunity. New manager, can try things out, can have a look at things, can maybe integrate a couple of younger players or things like that. But for me, Joe, no, it's going to be a Dublin Kildare final.
And with that, Daniel, Dublin Kildare in the final, obviously you think Dublin will win that. Can you see Kildare then making a run through the qualifiers?
Yeah, quite possibly. I suppose a lot depends on the draw now at this stage, really, because you're going to probably be getting a big gun, and it's there's a massive amount of luck with it, really, to be honest with you. If they get the right draw and the right venue, absolutely. And Stevie kind of said that they definitely are playing with a bit more bottle and a bit more guts this year. I'll wait to see a championship game in Croke Park and to really stress test what they have, because as we said, energy and aggression, all these things will get you to a point, but it's the overall structure is what's going to take you over the line. So absolutely, if they get the right draw, yes, they can of course go for a run, but I still think they're probably a couple of years away from maximizing their development. I'd say another maybe year or two. Obviously going down to Division 2, I'd say it's a bit of a hit to the system. If they could have stayed up in Division 1, another year under the belt playing Division 1 would have been massive, and getting confidence in what you're doing. But when it comes to the business end of the year, I can't see Kildare kind of just yet making that jump.
Okay, perhaps a bit too early for Kildare. Moving on to Ulster, lads. Stevie, we'll have a look at the Monaghan Down game. Let's get this one out of the way as quick as we can. Now, Monaghan looked comfortable throughout this match. I heard James McCartan getting interviewed after the match, and he said the game went according to script. Monaghan were really good, but how much of that was down to Down's approach to the game and everything that happened before the game and just the state of Down football, I suppose?
Well, I suppose first things first, Joe, for me, there's no script for any game. You know, you write your own script in any game of football. So I don't like that terminology. But look, for me, Monaghan had 11 different scorers on the day. I seen Monaghan playing this year, Joe. Like even the likes of McCarran and McManus were quite relatively quiet there on Saturday pass, which is actually very concerning from a Down point of view. You know, the goals either side at half time where Monaghan switched off for a 5-minute period, you know, put a half decent gloss on what was an absolute pummeling, Joe, of the highest order. One of the worst defeats, I would say, in championship history for Down, you know, probably coupled with the Donegal defeat in Paddy Tally's last year. But it's a culture thing, Joe. It's seeped in throughout the county now. It's seeped into the players. It's seeped in everywhere. It is seeped in everywhere. We have a minor team that were absolutely, you know, played off the park by Fermanagh a few weeks ago, and a minor team for the first time, I think, ever in the history of minor football had multiple walkouts of the panel, you know, players walking away from the panel and stuff. That's unheard of, like at that level. And I just think, Joe, we're in a really bad place from a Down perspective. I'm obviously coaching and managing in Down at the minute, your own club, Mayor Bridge. And like, I've watched Down club football, Joe, for the past 10, 11 years, and I can't accept the talent's not in the county. I can't accept those words. I really just can't accept, oh, the players aren't here, we are where we are. I hate that narrative. I hate it. I just think it's wrong, because I'm looking at talented players every week in the Down club leagues. And I said to Daniel off the record as well, like we're coming up against teams every Friday night, and every Friday night you have 4 or 5 key players in every club team you're looking at going, he is capable of playing county football. He's capable of playing county football. He's capable of playing county football. And that's just Division 1, Joe. So let's go into Division 2, Division 3. I'm sure there's other players in the M divisions as well that are equally as capable. But there doesn't seem to be any apathy. There doesn't seem to be any love or passion or want to play for Down. It seems to be a chore for some people. It seems to be just a hobby. You know, there needs to be a group of players, Joe, that are going to solely commit for 4 or 5 years to a program, to an S&C program. There has to be consistency in that respect. There's to be consistency within a management team as well. There has to be a management team there the players see is going to be there for a bit of longevity, not someone who's there for a stopgap. And I don't, you know, particularly blame James for it, but at the same time, players aren't stupid. Players know James is only there as a quick fix. They're going to just take advantage. They're going to take liberties. You know, his hands are then tied. So it's a whole combination of things. For me, what is the way forward? Well, there needs to be a branch review of everything from county board level right down to the bottom, development squads, the whole lot. There needs to be key personnel approach. There needs to be top coaches in the county, young people who are enthusiastic, who are energetic, teachers as well. There's plenty of good people within this county to drive this thing forward, but they need to be approached. They need to be sitting around a table in the Canal Court in Derry or Burndale and Newcastle and saying, right, what are we going to do here now and where are we going to start? And we start from the bottom and we work up, Joe. And you see the senior level, and I know, listen, spoke to Damien McCrink the other day, Damien, and made a very good point. He says, anybody under 24 years of age, get them in under 24, take your hit, go to Division 4, build like Derry did, rebuild with a group of young lads who want to play for Down, who are willing to put their shoulder to the wheel and commit to everything and just move on with that. And you may take a hit for 4 or 5 years, whatever it happens to be. Derry did it. Look where they are now. They got the right man in place. There's longevity with Gallagher. He's maximising what he has there. Yes, Derry have good footballers, etc. But that on Saturday, Joe, was a tough watch. And I would say, Joe, it was probably one of the worst supported Down teams in living memory, because there was no one that I knew went to Clone.
Yeah, there certainly was something like 3,000 or 4,000 at Clonus, and it's not something that you would expect from a Down team. Daniel, Stephen pointed out earlier on in the podcast that one of the Down players had an interview with one of the papers in the north, the Irish News, and he said that he wasn't looking forward to the Tailteann Cup and that it was pointless. Now, this is the opposite of what sort of James McCartan has said, but James McCartan says, you know, we need to be competitive in the Tailteann Cup. So some of the players aren't interested. So this is a really bad situation.
Yeah, and I was trying to think of this with my players hat on as well, and I was unfortunate enough to get the last year to Tommy Murphy, and I remember training in between with low numbers, and it was torturous. And obviously we went away and plugged away at it regardless and played our game. We lost Antrim, and it wasn't a great memory. So from a player's point of view, it just wasn't, it wasn't fantastic. So I can kind of understand where he's coming from, but I look at I've been in contact with Stevie a good bit, and you're looking at the down club scene. Like, what would I want to be doing as, let's say, a Mayo Bridge player at the moment if I'm in with a county team? Do I want to be training for 4 or 5 weeks with maybe 10, 11 lads there getting ready for a Tailteann Cup game, or do I want to be playing really high-class competitive league games with my club? And I know the background of what's going on up there, and the lads are getting some top quality coaching, like, and they're top quality S&C and a good vibe around the panel, like, and I can only imagine it's the opposite of that in with down at the moment. I'd say it's quite toxic. I'd say it's a hard place to be, and there's only one decision for me personally there as a player. Anyway, I know what I want to commit to, because at this point in time, I'm looking at, well, what's my area of success? A county final with my club. I want to win a league or win a club championship. So that's the way I'd be approaching it. But it's the mixed messaging even isn't good coming from the both. And this is where I come back to the original thought process of after the league, like maybe people in Down thought they could win Ulster. I don't know. Is that thought process always there every year, or would they have would they be humble enough to say, right, lads, Ulster's not for us, but maybe we could have a little bit of development with the Tailteann Cup? But we've all heard the kind of rumours pre-championship that were coming out in bits and pieces, and if they weren't taking Ulster seriously, they're definitely not going to take a Tailteann Cup seriously. So yeah, it's not good. It's not good. And I think Steve used the word mismanagement, and it's not necessarily mismanagement of the senior team, but there seems to be mismanagement from the top down. And there's without doubt, I was even looking at some of the physical conditioning of some of the down fellas. There's really good athletes there, but it looks like they're kind of a bit of headless chicken stuff, and that's obviously coming from the top down, and that probably needs to be addressed as soon as possible, or it's just going to continue in this fashion.
Yep, there certainly seems to be no particular type of game plan. Boys, moving on to Derry and Tyrone, probably the best performance of the weekend. Stevie, incredible performance there from Derry. What were your overall thoughts on that?
I think, Joe, Rory Gallagher is obviously, renowned for being a defensive coach, as lazy punditry would have told you in the past. But in fact, Joe, one of the things that I think he is actually really, really rejuvenated in Derry is, and they were one of the highest scoring teams in the National League on the turnover, which is interesting. They got a large proportion of their scores from turnover ball. And when you turnover ball, Joe, a team is probably vulnerable for those first 10, 15 seconds. So I think what Derry have really progressed on this year is their ability, Joe, to maximize a turnover into a score. And that comes, Joe, from a lot of hard work. It comes from getting runners ahead of the ball. It comes from getting the right personnel on the ball. It comes from a serious high level of conditioning. And that's something that Derry have been doing. Obviously it was well documented. Derry would have been training away, at different stages, maybe when other teams weren't training, and that was a fact. Like, people in Derry would have told you that, and that's where you get gains. That's where you obviously make gains on teams. But look, impressively on Sunday, Joe, that 31 attacks and they scored 19 times. Tyrone had, I think, 29 attacks and only scored 10. They limited Tyrone to 3 points in play as well. But look, they've got a huge level of experience, Kieran, the likes of Brendan Rodgers, Christy McCaig, McKinless. Those guys are warriors, absolute warriors. McCaig's a gem. He's Marty Clark described him at BBC One as one of the best man markers in Ulster. I remember watching Christy McCaig performing a man marking role on Diarmuid Connolly when Slough-Neil played St. Vesters. The game was in Newry, an All-Ireland semi-final. It was phenomenal. Not only did he stop Connolly going one way, he sent Connolly the other way and got 3 scores from play. Connolly scored 1 point and McCaig got 3, and never give him a step. And it was one of the most outstanding individual displays of half-back play I'd seen. Brendan Rodgers, an absolute animal at full-back, and McKinless, what a game McKinless had on Sunday. Just snarling the whole way through the game. And we're chatting about it today in the PE staff room, and we're sort of saying, probably one of the reasons why Brian Kennedy got sent off was because he was that frustrated that McKinless was just tearing pieces out of him. And then, Joe, sprinkle in the Benny Hearns and the McGuigans and the Niall Loughlins. Terry have good footballers, really good footballers. And I would say, looking at obviously Kilcoo this year, we're Ulster club champions, but I would say Malachi O'Rourke and Ryan Porter, they're not hanging around Waddy Graham's for another year for nothing. They obviously smell an opportunity Joe, to really win an Ulster club title with that group, and Derry have good footballers, Joe, really good footballers.
And Stevie, you mentioned their defenders there, McKaig, Rogers, McKinless, obviously, you know, brilliant 1v1 defenders, but also, you know, the likes of Connor Glass, Benny Hearn chipped in with a few points, as you've said, Shane McGuigan. They have good forwards as well that can win you games at the latter parts of the championship.
Brilliant forwards, absolutely brilliant forwards, Joe. And this is the thing, like, but this is the same group, Joe. This is the same group who had to go to Division 4 to rebuild. You know, don't forget that. Like Derry were, I don't think they were as bad as us. I don't think they were as bad as us. But one thing that they had was, and it's a big thing as well, there was the clubs in Derry had there was a lack of apathy towards the county board, and clubs in Derry historically always struggled to sort of come together, and there was always a hatred between Balahi and Ballinderry and Slaughtneil, and you know, there wasn't a real good feel about it. But what Gallagher has done is he's brought all the clubs together. He seems to have created, Joe, and Daniel will tell you this because he's quite fresh from in the county panel, but you need a club spirit in a county panel. That's the secret to a really good successful county team. Like if you've got fractions and egos and the likes of that, it's not going to work, Joe. You know, and I think that's one thing that Derry have done as well. They've got a really good collective sort of togetherness and buy-in. But Joe, mark my words when I tell you this, like this didn't happen overnight, Joe. This didn't happen overnight. There's been a lot of good work going on. I know people that have been involved in the academies in Derry. You know, the work that's been going on behind the scenes. The clubs are doing an enormous amount of work. But Joe, their schools, the likes of St. Pat's Maharas and Mary's Marafelt, these guys, Joe, like these schools are putting fierce work in, like, you know, and they're winning Ulster titles every other week, and you know, and at every level, particularly A grade level, and this doesn't happen overnight. Like, you know, it's not just a wee Gallagher comes in, waves the magic wand, and everything's great again. Like this has been a process that has been going on for a long time, and listen, they're here and they're here to stay, and I'll tell you what, they'll be hard to beat in that semi-final.
And Daniel, just as Stevie said, there are two questions on this. First of all, with Derry, do you think they're now at the top table? Would you say they're a top 5 team that can go on to get to the semi-final, final of the All-Ireland? And secondly, Tyrone, how disappointed were you in Tyrone?
Well, I suppose firstly, from the Derry point of view, like Stevie did say, this has been coming for a while, and I was looking at that performance Sunday, and I was thinking back to Ballybuffet last year, where they probably should have beat Donegal, and it was the exact same script. You know, the blueprint was there for Tyrone. They knew what they were going to get. It was, you know, McKaig was doing a man marking job, McBeardy that day, the exact same as what he did in McCurry, and Donegal were just probably a little bit more savvy than Tyrone were on Sunday, and that's probably what got them over the line. But no, to be honest, I don't think they're there yet. And the one reason for that is that performance was hugely emotional. It was high energy, really high energy, and it was counter-attacking football. And I'm just wondering, and again, myself and Stevie know this, when you go to Croke Park and you come up against a better team or whatever it might be, that counter-attacking football is a lot harder to play, because you do have, there is, even though the dimensions mightn't be a whole lot different, it's a tougher place to play a counter-attacking football. So the thing for Derry would be replicating that energy, replicating that kind of high octane sort of middle third play. And that was one thing I thought that they did really well was, you know, when they did turn Tyrone over, they were sending 6, 7, 8 runners, not necessarily to get on the ball, but to mess up that whole middle press from Tyrone. So Tyrone would have liked to, I'd say on occasion, got a little bit of a high squeeze on Derry and not let them out of their own half. But because Derry had so many runners coming out of their half of the field, Tyrone had to follow men. And that just opened up gaps then for runners, you know. And Derry were excellent, no doubt about it, you know. But it's backing up this performance now. That another performance is going to be the big thing for them. But after going on the rant there and forgetting about your second question, Tyrone, wasn't it?
Yeah, Tyrone. How much of it also was down to Tyrone's performance? Discipline-wise, they got 2 red cards as well. That seems to have let them down throughout the year. We're now for Dooher and Fergal.
Yeah, we were, myself and Steve were hacking up a golf course there on Monday, and we were having this chat, and I said to him on the 18th, just as I was becoming disillusioned with my 25 points, but I said to him, you know what, I wouldn't be surprised to see them knocking around an All-Ireland final again this year. And just for Tyrone are always good with a cause. I don't think they like being favourites. I don't think they like that people like them. I think they want to be hated. They want to be everyone against them, and that's kind of where they're at now. People are writing them off immediately, and look, I think they kind of went away a little bit from what they had been kind of doing fairly well. I think last year after Killarney, which was a similar performance, I feel, for them, where they got a bit of a hammering from Kerry in the league, and they just went back to brass tacks, which was what do Tyrone do well is counter-attacking football. And usually when you get two counter-attacking teams playing against each other, it's the first to blink. And I felt Tyrone almost felt they didn't need to drop off Derry. They kind of said, we can kind of play a little bit more expansively, and Derry picked them off. So I think Tyrone will go back to kind of square one of getting their defence in order and going from there. And look, a lot depends on the draw. And I said if they pulled Armagh the first round or someone like that, I wouldn't be backing against them, because Tyrone with a cause are extremely dangerous. But in saying all that, the squad probably isn't what it was. They probably don't have the same impact coming off the bench. But I still have a sneaky suspicion that they will be an extremely hard nut to crack, just purely if they get the discipline. You mentioned discipline. Discipline has to be tightened up, but I think they'll have a little bit of a say towards the end of the year. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly you should see them getting their act together in the qualifiers. Munster, we had the Limerick-Clare game, Stevie. That was the drawn game that went to penalties. Did you see that penalty shootout?
I did, Joe, and it's just a quick one for you, right? It's something that always mystified me, like in that, yes, okay, the Tyrone Derry game was chosen by BBC and RTE as the live game on Sunday. No issue whatsoever. I'm not sure why they had to show Monaghan and Down. I'm not sure why they had to show Dublin and Wexford, because predictably these games were always going to go one way. But there was a perfect game, with Limerick and Clare to showcase what is very good about counties outside of the big guns, and there's a Clare side who, from a durability point of view, and Daniel knows David Tuberty well, and obviously they have maximised all their resources that they've had, to stay in Division 1 or Division 2 again, for that group is phenomenal, when you consider they're maximising everything they have, and they've got some fine footballers, Clare. But as I said to you, it's a fantastic win for Billy Lee and Limerick. I texted him during the week to congratulate him, and he said it was one of those games that literally had everything. He says, Stephen, every box that had to be ticked was ticked in that game, cards, drama, late scores, missed chances, penalties, the whole lot. And listen, it's a cruel enough way to decide a game, but it adds a wee bit of crack to it as well, I suppose, for supporters and that. And don't think it's too pleasantly, you'd be too happy if you were in the losing side, but it was serious euphoria. And you see what it meant to the Limerick players too, Joe. Them Limerick players, let's be honest, the Limerick players know they're not going to win Munster. But my God, if they got to a Munster final, what an achievement for that group. To get to a Munster final, big day out, march behind the band. That's what it's all about, Joe, and creating those memories for that group. And again, as I say, I think Tipperary beat Waterford comfortably as well in Munster. But look, there's one winner in Munster, Joe, and I don't think we need to analyse much more than that.
Yeah, Tipperary play Limerick, and Cork and Kerry, I think, are on next weekend. Daniel, is that the way you see Munster going? Kerry?
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost, as I say, without being disparaging to anyone, but it is going to be the case. I can't see Cork causing an upset. But just on Stevie's point on the scheduling of the games, if anyone did a little bit of research on Clare and Limerick, I mean, they've had quite a number of really close contests since. I think Clare have been on the winning end since 2012, but Limerick have been reeling them in, getting closer, and it would have been a nice nod to, let's say, what we're looking at now with the Tailteann Cup coming in, that if Sky or RT or whoever might have had the rights just said, actually, we've done our research, let's look at these two teams, this could be a cracker. That would have been a real kind of a fill-up for the I won't say lower tier, but those other counties who might think they've no hope of getting on TV, and would have been great to see that game live. I watched the penalties, I think it must have been on an iPhone or something, some of the Sunday game coverage, but it was an awful pity you couldn't have seen it properly and got to see the whole game, because it looked like an absolute cracker. But however, so look, I'd say Kerry are going to be safe enough, I'd say.
Certainly was an entertaining game. Clare missed the first two penalties, and then Limerick's penalties were excellent. Moving on, lads, to the last province, Connacht. Stevie, you mentioned it earlier about Tony McEntee getting interviewed and saying how important the Tailteann Cup is for Sligo. Your old county there, Roscommon, there was an early sending off in that game from Sligo, and they didn't really recover from that.
Yeah, look, whatever chance Sligo had, Joe, with 15 men, they're not going to have any with 14 men, particularly against the Roscommon team who are playing with a lot of confidence. Obviously, injury free this year. Ultan Harney injury free, Cathal Hennigan injury free, Donny injury free. The guys have come back this year, in really good shape. They've had a good winter. The big thing about Roscommon, Joe, and I've said this before, is that there's a very good 15 footballers in Roscommon that can compete with anybody on any given day. The big issue that you have is if you pick up 5 or 6 injuries or whatever, a man not available for whatever reason or another, when you start to delve in deeper into the panel, and it was one of the big things I remember saying to Brian Carl at the time, the chairman, like what they needed to do to compete on a regular basis and break that glass ceiling of getting to a last 4. And one of the things he said for me was obviously to have a conveyor belt of players coming through on a regular basis, Joe, that were able to compete with the likes of Dublin or Galway or Kerry, because from a size perspective and a population perspective, they're always going to produce big players, big panels. And that's one thing about them. On their day, Roscommon's 15 will give anybody a game. And listen, I wouldn't be surprised if they were to win Connacht this year at all. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest, because they're playing with a lot of confidence again. And Division 2 is probably the level that suits them a little bit better. You get to Division 1 and it's a bit more of a hard edge needed, Joe, and a bit more of a deeper panel. Like there's Tyrone, for example, this year lost 5 players from the Armagh game, and the following week they played Kildare and still grind out the win. I think if Roscommon were to lose 5 of that current starting 15, would they grind out wins in Division 1? No, probably not. Would they beat Galway? No, probably not. So listen, they have a great opportunity to keep everyone fit. Conor Daly's back there, seen at the weekend as well for a spell. He's back from injury, so he'll tighten things up as well defensively. But probably Daniel would have seen it in the league final as well, the National League final, the Connacht final. Well, sorry, I'm being disrespectful to Leitrim, actually. I think Galway will probably beat Leitrim this weekend, and it'll be a Connacht final of Galway and Roscommon. But I think looking back to the National League, it's going to be a tale of 2 goalkeepers. And I know people sort of think, oh, there's too much made of kickouts or restarts or whatever you want to call them, but they're a huge part of the game. There's 30 in a game. There's perceivably possibly 25 to 30 kickouts in any one game, for a team. So you're looking at the guts of 50 kickouts, maybe possibly in a game, Joe. So they're a massive, massive part of the game. And I think, Roscommon have probably struggled when teams have pressed them, and Galway have struggled when teams have pressed them. So it'll be very, very interesting Connacht final to see whoever comes up, possibly with an innovative and creative kick-out strategy, could be the team that gets over the line.
Yeah, that's certainly going to be an interesting game. Obviously, Galway will have to get over Leitrim first. Okay, lads, just before we sign out, I know we've got football matches and training to go to ourselves. We don't really, Daniel, we don't really delve in too much to the hurling side of things, but there was a handshake at the weekend there. What were your thoughts on that handshake?
Yeah, it was interesting, and I was a bit surprised when I saw it. But then I was thinking, this isn't unusual, is it? And it's probably a pity the Sky Sports cameras weren't at the league final that day. I'm pretty sure if there was a lip reader and we saw a video, you might see Stephen saying best of luck in the first round of championship, John. I think that's what was coming out, was it, Stephen? I think.
Is that Tommy Sugru? I think that's Tommy Sugru, is it? The least manager. No, listen, hey, look, I was John saying to me, he says, you're very welcome down to O'Loughlin's Hotel in Port Leash after for a pint with myself and Colin Parkinson. That's what he said to me.
There's certainly no animosity between yourself and John Sugru there, Stevie, was there?
No. It's just a friendly exchange of, look, if you need anything, give me a call, John.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, lads. Well, listen, thanks very much for coming on the show, and thanks for listening in to everyone. And hopefully we'll see you in 2 weeks' time.